Hello shooters, today's episode of TI's Toys is the Mosin Rifle. Windhoefke Mosin. Okay, I find it interesting to note that this rifle in Russia was not called the Mosin Nagant. It was called the three-line rifle model of 1891. Mosin's name, nor Nagant's name, was affiliated with it. Nagant didn't have anything to do with the rifle, really. He sued for some money, and they gave it to him because he was making revolvers at the time. But the designer of the rifle is Mosin, and so in Russia it can be called the Windhoefke Mosin, which means the rifle of Mosin. We use a Z here in America. We call it a Mosin instead of a Mosin, but that's just, no big deal. This is a cool old rifle. Let's kind of look at it a little bit. It's old school, folks, 1891. It was used up through the end of World War II. It's got a steel buttstock. The wood on it is, on this particular one, is not laminate. In some of the ones they made during World War II, it's laminate. It's a long rifle. The barrel is long on this thing. Compared to its contemporaries, the Mosin was longer, but not heavier, which is, they did a good job of keeping the weight down in this thing comparatively to the other rifles. Like the German K98, it was shorter, but weighed the same weight. The Enfield Mark III was shorter, but weighed the same amount. The 03 was shorter, but weighed the same amount. The M1917 Eddystone was shorter, but was heavier. So this is a long barrel thing, but they kept the weight down. When you put the bayonet on this thing, it is really long. It's going to be longer, taller than most of the guys that carried this thing in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Your average Russian soldier, Soviet soldier, Chinese soldier, Vietnamese soldier is going to be shorter than this thing. With the bayonet attached on it, it's like 5'6". It's almost as tall as I am. So really long when you attach the bayonet to it. It's with the bayonet off it, it's not bad for, even though it's really long, it's not bad for being a balanced rifle. The weight isn't way out front, so it's quite balanced. The bolt is a fast action bolt, so you can load it and unload it quickly. You can load it and reload it quickly. It is loaded by stripper clips. The trigger pull on this, and they're all over the map on these things, the trigger pull on this is a long, gritty, about 5.5 pounds, which is not bad for a pull weight. But it's like pulling a brick over some railroad tracks. It's not smooth. Some of them may be smooth. The example I have is not smooth. It has a cleaning rod under the barrel. The front side is protected by a hood. The rear sight has no protection. My particular example is a Hex Receiver. I got the Hex Receiver because it looks cool. There's absolutely no difference mechanically or accuracy regarding what receiver you got on this. My particular example, the bore is really dark. It does have rifling still in it, but it's like looking down a sewer pipe. It's dark, and it's really hard to get a dry patch through the barrel because there's so many pits in there from rust. These were all shot with corrosive ammo. But using surplus ball ammo, it will shoot 4 or 5 inches at 100 yards, which is what most of the contemporaries would do at 100 yards back in the day too. So even though the bore is rough, there's enough rifling in there that it spins the bullet good enough. Cool old rifle. Lots of history with these things. I love the color of the wood. They're just fun rifles. They're not necessarily fun to shoot a lot because of this steel buttstock and everything, but they're cool old rifles to have. They were relatively cheap back in the day. Now their prices are climbing because supply and demand. There's not many of these on the market anymore compared to what they used to be. But they're still good old collector rifles. Just incidentally, and you may want to fast forward through this, just at the history part, it was never called the Mosin Rifle. It was always called the Triochlinia Windhoefke Obrazca 1891. 3-line rifle is what that means. Way back in the day during Peter the Great, we're talking the mid-1600s, their measuring system back then, he adopted what they call the line system. And one line was what we would call, in modern machinist language, 100,000ths of an inch. Back then they called it 1/10 of an inch. And if you don't work in machining circles, you'll probably call it 1/10 of an inch anyway. So this was a 3-line rifle, meaning it was 300,000ths of an inch, or 0.3 of an inch, or 30 caliber. That's where the 3-line comes from. So a 50 caliber would be a 5-line rifle. A 40 cal would be a 4-line rifle. This was adopted as the 3-line rifle. And the name Mosin came attached to it later on. Nagant's name was never attached to this rifle in Russia. You'll never find any Russian literature that says Mosin Nagant. It just doesn't exist. Nagant had nothing to do with the design. He wanted to take credit for part of it, but he didn't have anything to do with design. So they decided not to have any name attached to it to avoid scandal or whatever. So officially, this, the 3-line rifle of 1891, and there was different models of it made all the way through up to the end of World War II, was used around the world by many, many, many armies. It's still used around the world by militias and by farmers and by hunters up above the Arctic Circle. This is just a workhorse of a rifle that, as long as you have ammunition, gonna work. The recoil on this Mosin is not punishing. It's not fun, but it's not punishing. It's not like shooting a big fat Magnum or something. This is more on the range of a 308 or 30-06. Yeah, since it has the steel butt plate and the design of the wood is not best for recoil management, yeah, you can feel it when you touch this thing off. And a lot of people, if they're going to shoot a lot of rounds through it, will obviously add a rubber butt pad or something at the back to make it a little bit more pleasant. But for shooting, a half dozen rounds, it's not that big a deal. And that's that's all I'd want to shoot out of this, was, about 20 rounds maximum. Not like an AR or an AK we're going to crank through, some hundreds or maybe even 1,000 or 2 a day. But this is, it's a toy for me. A lot of people I know, even in America, use it as a workhorse. But for me, this is just a collector toy. I enjoy it. Cool old rifles. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate all the shares, likes, and subscribes. If you have a Mosin, post down below about your experience with it. They're cool old rifles. I like them. Have a great day.